The scariest thing about evil is not its monstrosity, but its normality. We have this idea, don't we, that evil has a face, that it looks like something, a snarling villain from a storybook, a wild-eyed fanatic screaming on a grainy newsreel. We imagine monsters with twisted souls, fundamentally different from us. It's a comforting thought. It's comforting because it creates a distance, a safe space between us and them. But what if the greatest horrors in history weren't committed by monsters? What if they were committed by men like this? By terrifyingly, terribly normal people? People who kissed their children goodnight. People who worried about their careers and their pensions. People who, in the morning, looked in the mirror and saw a good person staring back. This isn't a story about monsters. This is a story about the monster that sleeps in us all, and how, without vigilance, it can awaken.
In 1961, the world's attention was fixed on a courtroom in Jerusalem. Inside a specially constructed glass booth sat this man, Adolf Eichmann, a high-ranking Nazi SS officer, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust, the logistics man, the bureaucrat who organized the trains that sent millions of men, women, and children to their deaths at camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka.
The world expected to see a monster, a rabid anti-Semite, a sociopath foaming with hatred. The prosecutors painted him as a diabolical mastermind. But the woman sent to cover the trial for the New Yorker magazine saw something else entirely, something far more disturbing. Her name was Hannah Arendt, a brilliant German Jewish philosopher who had herself fled the Nazi regime. She watched Eichmann day after day, listening to his testimony, studying his mannerisms, and she came to a conclusion that would ignite a firestorm of controversy. She wrote that evil, on a colossal scale, could be banal, mundane. She found Eichmann not to be a monster, but a clown, a man who spoke in endless cliches, in stock bureaucratic phrases, in officialese. He wasn't a perverted sadist. He was, in her now famous words, terrifyingly normal. Terrifyingly normal. Let that sink in. He wasn't driven by some demonic ideology, she argued. He was driven by a desperate desire to be a joiner, to fit in, to advance his career. His defense was simple, and it was the same one used by countless others at the Nuremberg trials. I was just following orders. He said he was just a cog in the machine. He did his duty. He obeyed the law.
What Arendt saw in that glass booth was not the face of radical evil, but a profound and absolute thoughtlessness, an inability, as she put it, to think from the standpoint of somebody else. He never truly grasped the reality of what he was doing. The human suffering, the shattered lives, the mountains of corpses, it was all just an abstraction, a logistical problem to be solved on a spreadsheet. He wasn't stupid, but he didn't think. And Arendt's terrifying conclusion was this: Eichmann was not an anomaly. He was a product of a system that made thinking dangerous and obedience a virtue. And this is where the story turns from him to you.
Do you ever feel it? That subtle pressure to stop thinking for yourself? The pressure to just go along, to adopt the opinions of your chosen group, your political party, your online tribe, to share the outrage of the day without ever reading past the headline, to accept the world as it is presented to you, because questioning it is just too much work. It creates friction. It might get you called out or canceled. It's easier to just follow orders. The sad truth is, Arendt wrote, that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil. They don't decide to become monsters. They simply drift. They abdicate the most fundamental human faculty we possess, the ability to stop and to think, to engage in that silent dialogue with oneself that we call conscience.
Eichmann wasn't an evil genius. He was a man who outsourced his moral judgment to his superiors. The state said it was necessary. The Führer said it was the law. Who was he to argue? He had a job to do. How often do you do this? In small ways. You're in a meeting and you disagree with the direction things are going, but you stay silent. Your friends are gossiping cruelly about someone, and you don't speak up. You see an injustice, a small one, on the street, and you look away, telling yourself it's none of your business. We tell ourselves it's pragmatism, it's about choosing our battles. But what happens when we stop choosing any battles at all? What happens when the muscle of moral courage atrophies from disuse? Arendt's warning wasn't about the past, it was about the terrifying human potential for what she called non-thinking. It is the fertile ground from which atrocities grow, because a population that has forgotten how to think for itself is a population that can be told to do anything.
But why? Why is it so easy to slip into this state? To understand that, we have to look deeper than history and politics. We have to journey inward into the architecture of the human psyche itself. And our guide for that journey is a man who spent his life mapping its dark continents, Carl Jung.
The great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung had a name for the part of ourselves that we refuse to see, the part we keep locked away in the dungeon of our unconscious. He called it the shadow. The shadow is everything you are, but have no wish to be. It's the sum of all your repressed weaknesses, your secret shames, your unacceptable impulses, the selfishness, the rage, the greed, the cruelty, the lust for power. It is the dark brother or sister who lives within your own soul. You don't get to choose whether you have a shadow. Everyone has one. As Jung wrote, unfortunately, there can be no doubt that man is, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself or wants to be. The only choice you have is whether you are aware of it. Most of us spend our entire lives running from our shadow. We build up a carefully constructed persona, the good employee, the loving parent, the righteous citizen, and we pretend that's all we are. We repress the darkness, pushing it down, hoping it will disappear. But it doesn't disappear. Jung warned that when the shadow is not made conscious, it doesn't just go away. It grows blacker and denser. It operates in the dark, an autonomous force hijacking your life. It's the sudden, inexplicable rage in traffic. It's the cruel remark that slips out during a friendly conversation. It's the self-sabotaging behavior that ruins your best intentions. An unacknowledged shadow will always, eventually, take control. And when it can't find expression directly, it does something even more dangerous. It projects. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism where you unconsciously take the parts of yourself you can't accept and you see them in other people. That politician you despise with every fiber of your being for their arrogance, perhaps they are reflecting a secret, disowned arrogance in yourself. That group of people you label as lazy and ignorant, Jung would gently ask you to turn inward and find the corner of your own soul that fears its own capacity for laziness and ignorance. It is so much easier to fight the monster out there than to face the one in here. This is the engine of tribalism, of polarization, of dehumanization. We take all our own inner darkness, our fear, our hatred, our insecurities, and we project it onto an other, the enemy. They are the problem. They are the ones who are evil. And once we have successfully made them the container for our own shadow, we can do anything to them. We can justify any cruelty, because we are no longer fighting fellow human beings. We are fighting the monster we see on the screen.
Eichmann was a man who had never met his shadow. He lived entirely on the surface. He was, in Jungian terms, completely unconscious of his own inner life. He was a hollow man, filled only by the rules and regulations of the Nazi Party. The entire Nazi regime was a terrifying example of a collective shadow projection. An entire nation, wounded and humiliated after World War I, projected its shadow onto a single group, the Jewish people. They became the screen for Germany's fears, its resentments, its disowned weaknesses. And a man like Eichmann, with no self-knowledge, no inner life to speak of, was the perfect tool for such a system. He didn't need to be a raging monster. He just needed to be empty. He just needed to be unthinking. Because he had never faced the darkness within himself, he was utterly incapable of recognizing the darkness of the system he served.
So let's make this uncomfortably personal. Right now, who is your Eichmann? Who's the villain in your story, the person or group that embodies everything you stand against?
Feel that certainty, that righteous anger. It feels good, doesn't it? It feels clean, simple. Now, here is the challenge, the difficult, courageous work that almost no one is willing to do. Jung posed a thought experiment. He asked us to imagine someone brave enough to withdraw all of their projections, to stop pointing the finger and to turn it back upon themselves. He wrote, "If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all his projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. Such a man has saddled himself with new problems and conflicts. He has become a serious problem to himself, as he is now unable to say that they do this or that, they are wrong, and they must be fought against."
This is the hardest work a human being can do, to look in the mirror and admit the capacity for that which I despise in others exists within me, to admit that you too have a capacity for cruelty, for dishonesty, for cowardice, for evil. Not that you are evil, but that the potential is there. It is part of the human inheritance. The person who does this work, Jung says, now lives in the house of the gathering. He writes, "Such a man knows that whatever is wrong in the world is in himself, and if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something real for the world." This is a revolutionary idea. It completely flips our understanding of changing the world. We think it's about winning arguments, about defeating the enemy, about imposing our will on the external world. Jung suggests the most powerful political and moral act you can perform is to stop projecting and to begin the messy, painful, lifelong work of integrating your own shadow. Why? Because the person who has confronted their own capacity for darkness is no longer easily manipulated. They can't be swept up in mass hysteria. They can't be fooled by propaganda that paints the world in simple black and white. They can sniff out the scent of shadow projection in a leader's speech from a mile away. They have traded the addictive certainty of outrage for the difficult, humbling wisdom of self-knowledge. Adolf Eichmann was a man who never once set foot in the house of the gathering. His house was empty. So the question is, have you? Have you ever truly dared to look at your own darkness? Or is it easier to just keep following orders, to keep pointing fingers, to remain terrifyingly normal? This path is not easy. Jung himself called it a disagreeable and painful process. So why would anyone choose it? Why trade blissful ignorance for painful self-awareness? Because the alternative is to remain a puppet, a cog in a machine you don't understand. The alternative is to risk becoming an Eichmann. And because on the other side of this painful journey lies the one thing everyone is searching for, true freedom. To find the tools for this rebellion, we must turn to another group of ancient thinkers.
philosophers who understood the chaos of the world and the weakness of the human mind better than anyone, the Stoics. For thinkers like the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the slave-turned-teacher Epictetus, and the playwright Seneca, the fundamental task of life was to distinguish between what is in our control and what is not. This is the great dichotomy of control. The Stoics argued that almost all human suffering comes from a simple mistake, trying to control what we cannot, while neglecting what we can. You cannot control the traffic, but you can control your reaction to it. You cannot control whether someone insults you, but you can control whether you feel insulted. You cannot control the ultimate outcome of your efforts, but you can control the effort itself. This seems simple, but it is the key to unlocking a kind of psychological invincibility. Adolf Eichmann lived his life entirely in the outer circle. He saw himself as a victim of circumstance, a man without agency. Orders were given, he would say, effectively claiming his own actions were not in his control. He was, in the Stoic sense, a slave, not to a master, but to his own unexamined mind.
The Stoic rebellion is the act of ruthlessly, relentlessly focusing your energy on that inner circle. It is the declaration of sovereignty over your own mind. It is the understanding that while the world can do many things to you, it cannot force you to think a certain way. It cannot force you to abandon your virtue. This is the ultimate antidote to the thoughtlessness that Arendt described. Thinking, in this context, isn't just idle daydreaming. It's a disciplined, active process. It is the act of examining your own impressions. When a wave of anger or fear washes over you, the Stoic pauses. They ask, is this event in my control or not? What is the virtuous way to respond? What would my best self do right now? This is the work. It happens in the quiet moments. It's not glorious. There are no crowds cheering you on. It is the silent, internal battle against the autopilot. It is the choice over and over again to be the pilot of your own soul, not a passenger. This practice of conscious, deliberate thinking does more than just make you resilient. It is the very thing that builds a strong inner citadel, a fortress of character that cannot be breached by the madness of the crowd or the orders of a tyrant. It is how you stop being a joiner like Eichmann and start becoming an individual. And here, the paths of Jung and the Stoics merge into a single great road. Jung called this journey of becoming a conscious whole individual the process of individuation. It is the lifelong task of integrating the disparate parts of yourself, your persona, your shadow, your conscious and unconscious mind into a unified, authentic whole. It is the process of becoming the person you were always destined to be. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. And wholeness, Jung insists, requires embracing imperfection. It requires integrating the shadow. You cannot be a whole person if you are pretending that half of your psyche doesn't exist. This is the great work. First, you must face your shadow. You must have the courage to withdraw your projections and own the darkness within, to recognize that you are not the flawless hero of your own story.
Second, you must practice the Stoic discipline of thought. You must build the habit of examining your impressions, of choosing your responses, of taking responsibility for your inner world. You must stop blaming fate or other people for your internal state. This is how you build a strong ego, not an egotistical one, but a conscious center of personality that can mediate between the demands of the outer world and the chaos of the inner world. The individuated person is no longer a cog in the machine. They are the machine, their own machine. They operate from an internal center of gravity. They possess a moral compass that does not waver with the shifting winds of public opinion or political ideology. They are, in the truest sense of the word, free. Hannah Arendt believed that this kind of thinking was the only thing that could save us. In moments of crisis, when all the external guideposts of morality have collapsed, when the law itself becomes a tool of evil, the only thing you have left is that silent dialogue with yourself. Thinking, she wrote, does not create values. It does not confirm, but rather dissolves accepted rules of conduct. It is a destructive, dangerous force. Dangerous to any system that relies on your blind obedience. The person who truly thinks becomes unreliable to the totalitarian mind, because their loyalty is no longer to the party or the state or the leader. Their loyalty is to the truth they discover within their own soul. So we come to the end, which is really a beginning. The fight against the banality of evil is not won on battlefields or in parliaments. It is won in the quiet, solitary theater of the individual human soul. It is won in the moment you choose to stop scrolling and start reflecting. It is won when you feel the intoxicating rush of collective outrage and you choose to take a breath and ask, is this true? Is this just? Is this projection? It is won when you admit to yourself, I was wrong. It is won every time you have the courage to examine a belief you hold dear and to discard it if it is no longer true. It is won when you forgive yourself for not being perfect and instead take on the much harder task of trying to be whole. This is not a path to power or wealth or fame. It is a path to something far more valuable, authenticity, integrity, a peace of mind that cannot be shaken by the chaos of the world. To reclaim your agency, to refuse to be a passive object of history, is the ultimate act of rebellion. It is to answer Hannah Arendt's chilling diagnosis not with despair, but with a quiet, firm resolve, the resolve to think. The man in the glass booth was a living testament to the fact that a life without thought is not only a life not worth living, it is a life that is profoundly dangerous to others. He never made the choice to be evil, but more importantly, he never made the choice to be good. He never made a choice at all. He just complied. The world will always provide you with a script to follow, a uniform to wear, an enemy to hate. It is the easiest thing in the world to simply play your part. But your real life, your one precious life, begins the moment you tear up that script, the moment you decide to stop following orders and start questioning them. The moment you realize that the most important journey is not the one that takes you across the world, but the one that takes you into the depths of your own soul. The moment you look into the mirror, meet the eyes of your own shadow, and for the first time, you don't look away. The choice is yours. It is always yours. The journey of self-knowledge is the most difficult and the most rewarding one you will ever take. If this film resonated with you, subscribe and join our community of thinkers. We all have to start somewhere, so I want to leave you with one question. What was the one thought, the one uncomfortable truth in this film that you will be wrestling with tonight? Share it in the comments below. Let's start the conversation, not with the world, but with ourselves.